Welcome back to Anxious Faith. I'm James Burke. Last episode, we chatted with Kimberly Smith on the topic of loneliness, how it affects us, and what we can be doing about it. Today, we're going to be continuing that theme by looking at something that many might say contribute to struggles with loneliness and social isolation: gaming. Video games can be a contentious topic. There are people that love them, those that don't, or those that simply don't understand the appeal. And then there are the stories we hear in the media about gaming addiction, social isolation, and a growing concern for the way gaming seems to lead to a whole range of mental health challenges. So, what do we think? Does gaming affect our mental health? Yeah, it probably does, but perhaps it's not quite so black and white. Today, we're chatting with Jacob, a lifelong gamer who shares how gaming has affected his mental health, both negatively and for the better. Jacob now runs a ministry seeking to reach one of the groups least represented in the church, gamers, and to build off their existing hobbies and interests to provide positive opportunities for social interaction and inviting gamers into spaces where they might also encounter Jesus. We'll hear Jacob's journey and discuss the bigger picture of gaming, as well as what we might need to watch out for in this space as Christians. We're also going to be joined by a familiar face, Maddie from our team. Is an outsider to the world of gaming, so we're bringing her into this interview to give a range of experiences in our conversation. So let's dive in with Jacob. So we're excited to be joined by Jacob. Jacob works with us, but also runs a ministry around gaming. And so, yeah, he's got a really cool story about both experiencing the positive and negative aspects of being a gamer and spending a lot of time gaming, perhaps maybe leaning almost to the addiction side of things a little bit, but not quite. But you'll also notice we've got Maddie here as well. Maddie as part of the Anxious Faith team. Yeah, we brought her here because, I'll be honest, I'm very much like Jacob in the fact that I'm a gamer. I have played games for a lot of my life. I still play games to this day. I play computer games a lot with my kids. It's a part of my life. So we wanted to bring in Maddie, who is not a gamer.
Complete newbie.
That's
Here
it.
to balance you two out, I hope.
Yeah, so we can have a bit of a discussion around some of the positives and negatives that might be finding around gaming, and have a different perspective. Someone asking questions that might not necessarily know what Jacob and I might be talking about, and so we don't just nerd out too much together and just be talking about.
I'm here to be the translator to the common man.
Exactly. That's it. So yeah, Jacob, thank you very much for joining us and being part of this.
No worries.
Why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself to start off?
Yeah, my name's Jacob. I work for Our Daily Bread Ministries as the production manager. So I look after all the printing that we do here, make sure that every stage of every resource gets done. So from the initial writing of the resource to the editing to getting the graphic design done to printing it, receiving it and sending it out.
Yeah, fantastic. You are also a gamer, which is something that's been a big part of your life. Like, how far back are we talking when we talk about gaming's been part of your life?
Gaming has been part of my life probably since I was about 3 years old when I started. No one would let me play with their Game Boy, so I used to draw Game Boys on a piece of paper and then sit there and play them for hours.
That's so cute. I love that.
Look, yeah, my kids drew Switches before they got a Switch. It's not just you. But yeah, so gaming has been a part of your life. From then, obviously, you got to a point where you got more than a paper Game Boy. You were able to start playing games yourself kind of thing. And it's been kind of a constant in your life since then, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I got a Sega Game Gear at a garage sale when I was about 7. And that was my first real kind of gaming console. And then, got a Nintendo GameCube a couple of years later. Eventually got given like an old gaming PC from a friend when I was in high school, and then never looked back and have been pretty consistently gaming PC and Nintendo gamer since then.
It's great. So gaming is a legitimate hobby. It's a legitimate job for some people as well. Like we see, especially post-COVID, the rise in Twitch streamers and esports and things like that. COVID forced us all to be stuck inside on our computers, and people went, oh, actually, I'm kind of good at this. And we started to accept it a lot more society-wise as that, this is a thing people do. I loved COVID because there was friends of mine that had never gamed before. All of a sudden now I got to play games with them. It was great. We used to play games after work during COVID
Yeah.
as well. It was something that got us through some of that time. But you've got a story about how gaming kind of has been both a really beneficial part of your life, but also has at times also been a bit of a negative influence or a negative effect on your life. You happy to kind of share that story?
Yeah, definitely. So coming out of high school, I was really struggling on the friendship front. One of my best friends from high school had moved to Tasmania, and I basically completely lost contact with him. And yeah, I was struggling a bit with feeling lonely. I later found out that I also had social anxiety. And yeah, I kind of found myself in a position where I just didn't really know what to do with myself. I was spending most of my evenings inside at the computer, watching TV shows and playing computer games. And I think it did get to a point where it was a bit of an unhealthy habit. It got beyond just being my hobby and became a way to just make the hours go by. There were plenty of nights where I sat there playing games, not because I was enjoying the games I was playing, just because I didn't know what else to do. I just needed something to keep my mind busy.
So that kind of escapism that you were kind of chasing, and that was the way you were able to kind of switch your brain off?
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't happy with what my real life was like. And so I just went into worlds where I could ignore my real life and focus on something else. And yeah, it kind of took over my life to an extent where it wasn't that I was addicted to the games themselves. It was just that I didn't know what else I could do. I never felt like getting up and going out and doing other activities. I didn't feel like there was anyone that actually wanted to spend time with me. So I was at home, well, what else am I going to do?
Yeah.
May as well sit there and play games.
And did other people in your life like notice that and say, hey, Jacob, what's going on? Or like, were they concerned?
Yeah, definitely. My family, I think, noticed that I needed something to change. I needed to do something else with my life, and they encouraged me to find other things to keep me occupied, to keep me happy. And it took a while. But eventually I went to see a psychologist, got a mental health care plan, and tried a few psychologists, didn't really find one that I gelled with. And then my GP sat me down and said, all right, let's just let's work out exactly who you're going to feel comfortable talking to, and I will find that psychologist for you. And he found one, and she was fantastic, and she listened to me, and she really helped me. And what she ended up saying was basically, it's going to be hard, but pick something you've got coming up. Go into your Facebook profile, look at your events. What have you been invited to? Pick one of them that you're going to say yes to and go and do it. And if it's uncomfortable for the first 10 minutes, fine. Just stick it out and see what happens. And I did, and people came and talked to me, and it wasn't awful. It wasn't the worst thing in the world. I didn't just,
I mean, you say it wasn't the worst thing in the world, it wasn't awful, but I'm guessing that first time you're deciding to actually push yourself and go, it's probably not the most pleasant thing to make
Pretty
yourself
scary.
do, right?
Yeah, it was scary and it was hard, but once I was there, the event was a friend's 30th, a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time. And after the first kind of maybe half an hour of feeling awkward and standing in a corner, people came up and spoke to me, and people were friendly to me, and people were pleasant to me. And I was still shy and nervous, but I was happy to talk. And after a while I was like, oh, I'm actually having fun. This isn't so bad. And I went home at the end of the night feeling a lot better than I did after any night of sitting there by myself playing games and watching TV shows.
Yeah.
Was that like a bit of an instant aha moment, getting home that first night after going out that, yeah, maybe actually this is what I need to be doing more?
Yeah, definitely. It helped me understand that I needed that social interaction. That even if I didn't have, even if, my best friend had moved away and I didn't just have someone that was going to be easy to sit down and chat with at any time, I still just needed to be around other people sometimes.
Yeah.
And it still made it hard. The next time that I had to kind of push myself to go out was just as difficult. I also kind of just felt like, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to, take a big mental toll, having to talk to people, having to, think of what to say. Kind of just want to stay home and do nothing. But I pushed myself to do it. And for a few months, I basically pushed myself to, if I got invited to something, whether it was a birthday party, whether it was a social event that someone had invited me to, whatever it was, if I was available, I would go to it. And some things were awful and I left after 15 minutes and some things were really good.
Yeah, nice.
And some things I would go to and learn a new game and make a new friend. And, now I've got friends that I still have today because I got up and went and did something and tried something new.
I like that, pushing yourself to do something even when you don't feel like it because you know it's good for you. Yeah.
Have you then since been able to kind of apply a bit of moderation to your gaming, or kind of know when you're starting to lean too much into just wanting to play games all the time? Do you still feel that desire at times?
Yeah, definitely. There are absolutely times where I think, I don't feel like doing anything tonight. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I've had a long day at work. I just want to sit at home and do nothing. But what I'll try to do is that even on those nights where I am too tired to go out or can't be bothered or it's cold and raining and not really a good night for going out, if I'm going to play games, I try and be more deliberate about what I'm doing. I'm not just sitting there passing the hours with anything. I either play a game online with some friends and we chat while we play, or I pick a game that I've been looking forward to, dedicate a few hours and let myself relax and play that game and immerse myself in that world. But the moment it stops being fun, I'll stop. I don't keep doing it just to pass the time. I do it because it brings me joy, and the moment that it doesn't anymore, I stop.
That's really interesting. So you shared that you went through a period where gaming was a bit of an escape and something that you were doing not necessarily because you enjoyed it, but just because you wanted to pass the time. But then it also sounds like you've had some really great experiences and gotten a lot of joy out of it. So could you talk a bit about like what you love about it and how that sort of...
How it's helped you. Yeah.
Yeah. There's two key things from my teenage years that really stand out to me. The first one was when a friend of mine at church had this old computer that he didn't need anymore, and he gave it to me. And that was my first gaming computer. And there was this game that I'd really wanted to try called Oblivion, and I'd never been able to play it because you needed a gaming computer. It wouldn't work on the just home computer that we had that didn't have a graphics card or anything. And I finally got to play it. And that was my first introduction to a big new virtual world where I could immerse myself in it and create a cool character and basically work through a story and have it not just be this is a game and you do this and you get from point A to point B, but it was big and it was open world and it was fun and it was challenging and it was more than just I'm sitting down to play a game. It was I'm actually interacting with a story.
Everyone remembers their first Elder Scrolls.
That's it. Yeah.
Got no clue.
Maddie has no idea what we're talking about, but I know that feeling.
First one yet.
Yeah.
And then the other side of it was at church, I'd really been struggling. I was in year 7 and I was not connecting well with the youth group at all. The youth group on Friday night was all about high energy, running around games, loud music, and that was not my scene at all. And there was a few others in the same boat, and the youth pastor recognized this and said, well, what do you guys like? And we liked video games. He said, okay, I'll make something happen.
Wow.
Give me a bit of time and I'll put something together because I want you guys to, I want you guys to be coming to church. I want you guys to be enjoying coming to church as well. So he started a LAN party.
Wow.
And we could take our own computers along and plug them into a network and play games all night. And it was great. And that's where I met my good mate Mitch. And that was in about 2007. And we played games together. And Mitch and I played games together for many years after that. And, 17 years later, Mitch was just my best man at my wedding a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And that friendship started with playing video games together. And that friendship has survived for 17 years because no matter what stage of life we're in, no matter where we are physically, mentally, anything like that, we can jump online and play games together. And we can, catch up with each other and play some games together. And while we play games, we chat.
Okay.
Neither Mitch or I, when we were teenagers, were the best at expressing our feelings, or we were both very much introverts, shy, not outgoing at all, not the sort of people who would openly talk about what was going on in their lives. But if we were sitting down, playing a game together, the conversation just flowed.
Okay.
And it started off as conversation about whatever game we were playing and very quickly turned into what was going on in our life. And since then, we've always been able to sit down, whether it's in person or online, and have a chat. And whether it's, one of us is having an issue at work, one of us has just broken up with a partner or whatever it's been, we're probably not the sort of people that are just going to sit down over coffee and talk about our feelings.
Sure.
But if we're playing a game, then those feelings just come out and we can talk to each other and know what's going on in each other's lives and support each other.
There's something that's really almost disabling of our kind of barriers that we put up when you're doing something alongside someone. I've often found that, if you're doing something together, then that, especially maybe it's a guy thing, I don't know. But doing something alongside someone else means you can talk while you're doing it and it's not that pressure to be actually, now we're just sitting and talking and I have to say what I'm feeling and try and make eye contact or things like that. But I'm the same. I've had some amazingly deep conversations with friends online, on voice chat while playing games, and going far deeper into friendship with them because of that space than ever would have been just from seeing them at small groups, seeing them at church, hanging out during the weeks and things like that. So
I get that too. Yep. Whether it's like on a bushwalk with someone where you're not having to actually look them in the eye when you talk about difficult things, or painting next to them, or a bit different from gaming, but same concept.
But ultimately, I think this is sometimes where gaming is a bit misunderstood. There's this kind of perception that gamers are people that are just by themselves, locked in a room, not interacting with anyone else.
Well, that's honestly what the perception that I have had. And it's only been through chatting with you guys that I've gone, it sounds so much more social than I knew it could be. And I like that from what I know about Mitch, you guys are pretty different sort of people. Like you don't have, I mean, from the outside, heaps in common, but you've got this connection through gaming.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that gamers are misunderstood a lot of the time because, gamers are disproportionately affected by things like loneliness, depression, social anxiety and other social struggles. But that has nothing to do with video games causing that. Playing video games doesn't suddenly make you depressed. It doesn't suddenly make you shy. It doesn't suddenly give you social anxiety. But the people that struggle with those things gravitate towards video games because it's a hobby they can do by themselves. It's an escape from the real world if they're not happy with what the real world looks like to them.
Yeah.
It's something that when their real world is falling apart, they can lock themselves in their room, put on their headphones, and go somewhere else. They can be, you know, a fighter or a counter-terrorist or a whatever they feel like being at the time. You can do that in a video game. And so, yeah, whenever I hear people say things like, oh, video games are just causing all these people to have mental health struggles and things like that, they're not. Video games are just what those people gravitate towards. And our focus shouldn't be on how can we stop people playing video games. It's, okay, well, how can we support those people and how can we use video games to encourage those people to still have a social life?
Let's talk about video games for a sec and some of these negative impacts we see from gaming. Yes, it's true. Gaming can be a negative. Video game addiction is a real thing, but also, you know, there are positive sides that, like we've seen from Jacob's story. So we want to spend a bit of time just talking this through, looking at some of those kind of generalizations or, assumptions people make sometimes, but also looking at how, hey, it's not necessarily just something that we can just go at willy-nilly and that we do have to perhaps set boundaries around and something that we do need to be cautious of. Let's, it's really interesting because in the prep for this episode, Maddie, you were saying that, you had this big idea that video games are just these socially isolated, depressed people.
Yeah, well, as an outsider looking in, I have never been friends or in the spaces in the internet with other gamers. It's just not part of my world or experience at all. And so all I was seeing were studies coming out or churches being concerned, ministries putting out articles saying, video games are stealing our youth. And I'm just like, oh, wow, these sound like really addictive. They sound like, I thought you play by yourself in a dark room. That's like not healthy for you. These must be a negative thing. And it's only been through working with you guys, and a huge part of our team love games, and kind of going, okay, there seems to be a bit more to this, but I'm really interested in that because I know that a lot of people like me who aren't in this world will have those judgments. So what would you say to the people who are concerned, maybe the parents who are seeing like their teen just spending hours and hours alone or who are seeing some of the negative effects? Because those seem like they do exist.
I think one of the first things to understand is that more people are gamers than perhaps anyone realizes. If you have a smartphone and you spend some of your time sitting on the train on your commute to work playing a puzzle game, that's a video game. You're a gamer.
Okay.
Most people, if you're in Australia and you pick a random sample size of people, most of them are gamers. Probably 90%. Because maybe they don't all have a PlayStation or have a $4,000 gaming PC that they can turn the graphics up to the max on the latest video games. But they'll have a smartphone and they'll play games.
They'll do the Wordle every day or they'll play Words with Friends.
That's me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
I hadn't thought about it like that.
Those people are gamers as well. And it doesn't matter what sort of games you're playing, whether it's in your room with your headphones on a giant screen on a PC, or sitting on the train on your phone, there's all the same dangers as with any video games. In fact, honestly, mobile games are probably worse because mobile games are designed to be addictive. They're not designed to be fun and immersive and tell great stories. They're designed to keep you playing, to keep watching ads, and to buy in-game purchases. And so, yeah, there's absolutely a lot of dangers around video games.
Okay.
People become addicted to them. People play them too much. People can spend too much money on them. You'll hear about people that get so ingrained in a mobile app that before they know it, they've spent thousands of dollars, which...
Or you hear the horror stories of the kid that has kept pressing the purchase button in the game on their parents' phone and all of a sudden racked up, $5,000 on the parents' credit card to the App Store or something like that.
Gosh.
So there are dangers with gaming. And like with anything, becoming addicted isn't good. Yeah. And everything should be done in moderation. And if you're at the point where you are, working a full 40-hour week of work and then each night you're going home and you're spending another 8 hours playing computer games, that's probably not the best thing for you.
Yeah.
But if video games are your hobby and you're spending a reasonable amount of time enjoying your hobby, that's fine. And that's actually a good thing.
Yeah. That's it. Having hobbies is a good thing. Having an outlet that isn't, that takes that stress from work or whatever and allows you to decompress for a couple of hours, that's a good thing. I actually gamed for a long part of my life and then didn't for probably a few years, probably around the time where I met my wife and we got married and that kind of thing. But it was actually after we had our first kid that we actually decided to almost invest the money in a new gaming PC for me, because we realized that life had changed. I wasn't able to go out and hang out with my friends as much. We had a new kid at home, that kind of thing. Those of you that know our story know that there was mental health stuff going on as well for us. And so I needed something, and I needed an outlet. And so we went, let's go spend the money and buy me a new gaming PC. Best thing ever. But because that was a way that I could have a hobby, have an outlet that meant I was still at home, but I still got that opportunity to have, that release and that outlet at the end of the day and things like that. But yeah, like you say, there are negatives and games can be dangerous, both from the addiction side of thing as well. But I think it's probably worth talking about even that whole kind of the content of games, because, you hear those stories about, people saying, oh, well, video games have turned my kid violent or, those sorts of things. And to some degree, yes, there are some really violent video games. But also, like you say, Jacob, I think moderation is one of those key things. We were kind of chatting a bit about how video games is kind of often gets this bad perception because, yes, there are ratings for games, but there's not really the access controls associated with the ratings like there are at the movies or things like that.
Okay. Yeah, this is a question I've had because from what I hear and see, there are very violent video games that go beyond just I don't know, normal first-person shooter or whatever. This is lingo I've picked up from you guys. That are, I don't know, perhaps glorifying violence or even things that go against our values as Christians. The Bible says we're to guard our hearts and minds. So what does that look like as a believer? Are there some games that are unwise to spend time in that might bring out aggression or encourage you into other things, I don't know, or sexualized content or things like that? Are those dangers in games?
Yeah, there's definitely games that personally I try to avoid because I don't think they're conducive to, being part of a healthy hobby. And I don't think they're good for my mental health. And yeah, I don't think they're helpful to be playing. And some of those things are around, well, what's the content in the games? Is it content that I'm going to struggle with?
Yeah.
But also it's, well, what's the nature of the game? And, I try and avoid playing mobile games that are designed to be addictive because I think they're just as, if not more dangerous than a game that's, full of violence and full of sex and full of other bad things. And one thing you mentioned, James, that I think is a concern that a lot of people have is people say, my kid's been playing this game and now, they run around the backyard pretending to shoot people. And games have ratings for a reason. And I don't think it's fair to blame video games for, my kids have become violent, when you've let your 7-year-old kid play a game with an MA rating.
Yeah, okay.
I think that some of the responsibility there falls on the parents to say, we want to make sure that our kids aren't getting addicted to video games. They're not playing games with inappropriate content. And so we're going to make sure that the games they play are appropriately rated for them. We're going to make sure that they aren't given the opportunity to spend 8 hours a night playing video games, because that's how they're going to develop those bad habits. That's how they're going to develop that addiction.
Yeah.
And
helping them to have moderation.
Exactly. And then once you're an adult, that, burden moves on to yourself, and you have to self-moderate, and you've got to make sure that, you're playing games that aren't going to negatively affect you. Got to make sure that you're playing games for an appropriate amount of time. And adults generally are a bit more equipped to manage that for themselves than kids are going to be. So it's all about making sure you're playing games that are appropriate for you, and making sure that you're only playing games, an amount that is going to be reasonable. Not so much that you're going to get addicted, not so much that it starts to take away from your other relationships. Not so much that it, results in you giving up opportunities for social interaction because you just want to be sitting in your room playing computer games.
Yeah. So what would you say to someone who maybe feels like, maybe I'm falling into that camp of finding it hard to stop playing, or just always wanting to get to, the next level, the next stage, just sort of being so engrossed in this world that by the time I take the headphones off or shut the computer off, I don't want to be in my real life. Like, what would you say to them? Are there things they should put in place? Are there ways that they could make their gaming, like their love of gaming, more conducive to their mental health, better for them?
Yeah, well, I think the things that have helped me are, being deliberate in taking time to still go out and have a social life. Even when it's hard, even when, you don't feel like it, just you get an invite to someone's birthday party, even if you don't feel like going, go, because it might end up being a great night.
Yep.
And then in terms of making sure that your passion for gaming doesn't just start negatively impacting you too much, make sure that every now and then you're playing games with friends in person, if you can. Whether that is going to a LAN party, whether it's just catching up at their house and playing couch games together, or there's not many of them left, but go to an arcade with a friend and play games there. Like, make sure that as much as possible, you're still using games to maintain those friendships and build new friendships where possible. And if you can, do it in person. If your friend's in another country and you can't catch up in person, try having a multiplayer gaming session online, but turn your webcams on so you can still see each other and talk to each other.
Yeah,
Try and introduce more social interaction into your time playing video games, and still set time aside to sit down and spend 5 hours exploring the amazing world of whatever single player game you're playing right now, because that's awesome. And if that's still bringing you joy, then that's great. But the moment that it stops bringing you joy, the moment that you're just doing it out of habit or routine or to pass the time, that's when it's time to turn it off and do something else.
I think that's the same as kind of any habit. The minute it starts actually impacting your life outside of that, or controlling parts of your life outside of it, that's usually a pretty good indication that maybe the balance isn't there, or the moderation isn't there. Like, I know for me, like, if I get a new game and I'm excited about it and all I want to do is play the game, I don't get to play it anywhere near as much as I want to because of the reality of life and kids and work and all that kind of stuff. But I know that I sometimes do still fall into that trap of playing a game too much. And for me, like, one of those warning signs is that I'll start having dreams about the game. And I'm just like, okay, I clearly have spent too much time either playing this game or thinking about this game. That's a sign that I need to cut back on that now. And I need to give that a break for a bit. I need to introduce some more moderation and some more boundaries around those kind of things. Otherwise, it does then cross over from a fun, healthy hobby to something that's controlling me rather than the other way around.
Yeah, and even though gaming has never been a hobby of mine, something you challenged me on in our pre-interview was like, well, what makes gaming any different from any other hobby that you could spend hours in? And I was reflecting on times where, like, I love sewing, I love, making clothes, and there have been times where I've spent the entire day just in that zone, and it feels positive. It feels like, well, I'm making something, so that makes this okay, but I'm ignoring my husband. I'm ignoring people trying to call me. I'm like losing the joy of it and just sort of in this obsessive, like, I have to get this done. I have to get to the next thing, which I think can be just as harmful. I can, end the day feeling really bad about myself and feeling like I lacked social connection and the love of it. So
one of the things you said about, trying to bring more social interaction into gaming was to, maybe go to a LAN. You're wearing a jumper, for those that are watching the video, that says the Big LAN. This is a ministry that you run. Why don't you tell us about what the Big LAN is?
And can I ask what a LAN is in general?
Yeah, good place to start.
I should have asked sooner.
Good place to start.
So LAN just stands for local area network, which means it's not online.
Okay.
It's a local network.
Okay.
And
so that you're physically got to be in the same space connected with cables to each other.
Okay.
Yeah. And a LAN party is when you bring your computer along and everyone else brings their own computer along. You connect into the same network and you play games with each other. And that's what the Big LAN is. We set up a big network. We have 150 people come along, bring their computers, plug them into the network, and we play games with each other all day. And we just hang out and we chat and we share our passion and love of video games. And we try to add a social aspect to this hobby that so many people think is antisocial.
That's so cool. How did that start?
Well, it started because a few years ago, my mate Mitch and I were sitting in the pub having dinner and reminiscing about the LAN parties that we went to at our old church and thought, we should have a LAN party. They were fun. We should do that. And I thought, I reckon I can get my church to let us run a LAN party there and we can get our friends along and, if we can get 20 people along, that'd be great. And we ran the first one and just, word of mouth and people inviting their friends. We had about 60 people and we thought, oh, there's something to this. And so we kept running them and they kept growing. And we had an event in October last year that had just over 300 people. Wow.
That's crazy.
It's just people that are sharing their love of video games and pop culture and hanging out and chatting about it. And it kind of serves as an icebreaker for people who might struggle with social anxiety or loneliness or not really know how to talk to other people that easily, because they don't need to figure out, what do I have in common with this person? They know. They both like video games. And especially if it's just after a tournament, we've put those two people in a game of Rocket League together. They know that they both like Rocket League and they've got something immediately to talk about because they can talk about the game they just played. And those conversations will start with talking about the game they just played and they'll expand into talking about other games they've played and, where they are on the international leaderboard and what their strategies are and what they do. And then it goes beyond that video game and they start talking about other video games they play and other hobbies they have and other aspects of their life. And it just flows naturally. And one thing we've seen that's really encouraging is we'll have two people that don't know each other that have come to one of our LAN parties by themselves. We've put them in a game together and then they rock up again at the next LAN party and they're sitting with each other and they're chatting and they're playing games together and, they might have struggled with it in the past, but now they've made a new friend. Yeah. And that's a friend that they can catch up with when they come to our LAN parties. They can play games together online. And they've ended up building a really strong friendship because they've discovered they do have a lot in common. Yeah. And that all started because, they knew each other liked the same game, so it gave them a platform to begin.
I love that you're doing it out of your church as well, because that's probably a really good outreach opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we try and do is we have people from our church come along and make sure that it's not just getting everyone in and they can build friendships with each other. It's we can have people there who are there to do nothing else but chat with people and build relationships with people and start new friendships. And they can go away and they can continue playing games outside of these events with them. And then maybe if the conversation goes that way, then they can invite them to something else at the church. Maybe we've got a young adults board games night coming up. They can say, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? Yeah. And if they're not, that's cool. But if they are, great.
And it probably takes a little bit of that fear of the unknown and out of it for some of them, because they're just like, oh, well, hang on, I've been to that church already 3 or 4 times to go to the LAN. I know what the place is like. And if it's just going there a different time, we're going to play board games this time instead of LAN games, then, maybe I will check it out.
These people are okay.
They seem to be normal, yeah.
That's it. And I think that's one of the things that we want to show people with this is that just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean I don't like the same games. Doesn't mean we don't share a lot of similarities in our hobbies and in the media we consume and all of that. The reality is the only difference between us is that, I've got this faith and maybe they don't.
Yeah.
In fact, there are people that have come to the LAN that outside of the fact that one of us is Christian and one of us isn't, I've got a lot more in common with them than I do with half the other people in my church. Yeah. And that's a really powerful tool because it means that, we've got so many different connection points that who knows, maybe they will be open to having a conversation about faith in the future, and maybe they won't, and that's fine too. But what I can do is I can just try and be Christ in that community. I can try and be loving, I can try and be inclusive, and I can try and help anyone that comes along to make new friends and find a way to enjoy their hobby in a really healthy way.
What I like about that is that so many times we're talking about doing Christian ministry, like how do we get people along to these events? How do we get people coming to church? And what you're doing is going, people are already playing games. You're meeting them where they're at in a space that they're already willing to be in. So, it's really cool. I haven't heard of Christian ministry sort of like bridging that kind of gap before. So, I love that.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of communities that are really underrepresented in the church. Gamers are one of them. And it can be difficult, right? You go along to a church and if you like music or if you like sport, you're set.
Yeah.
Almost every church will have a music team. And a lot of churches will have, sports groups and they'll go to state youth games and there'll be heaps to do. But if you rock up to a church and you like video games or you like remote control car racing or you like cross-stitching or you like
there are cross-stitching
anything
groups.
Yeah,
I've been in them.
But if you have a more obscure hobby,
like
most churches aren't prepared for that. They don't have something set up ready to go where they can easily engage you. And so one of the things that I think is important is just building communities and churches around as many different hobbies as possible to make it as accessible as possible to everyone and anyone that might come along.
Yeah, that's really cool. Jacob, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. If people want to find out more about the Big Land, how can they do that?
They can go to thebigland.com or you can just Google the Big Land.
Amazing. For our international audience, I'm sorry you probably can't come along to attend one of the Big Lands in person, but head to the website, see what they're doing. It's a really cool ministry that they're running. And yeah, if you've got more questions about gaming, faith, how these kind of things interact with our mental health as well, let us know. We'd love to know if this is something that you guys want to hear more about. So, but yeah, Jacob, thank you so much for being open to share, a bit of your mental health journey as well, and how gaming has played into that, and just have a chat with us about gaming today.
No worries.
Jacob's story highlighted for us that gaming itself isn't the cause of loneliness or social isolation. What it can be is a symptom of those existing struggles, or a way to numb ourselves from what we're feeling. As he shared, there can be unhealthy ways of engaging with gaming, but that's true of any hobby. It is encouraging to hear, though, of people like Jacob who see their love of gaming as a tool for connection and relationship, rather than a hindrance from it. If you'd like to check out what he's doing over at the Big Land here in Australia, you can check out his website in the description below. Our heart here at Anxious Faith is to spark conversations and tackle the taboos around mental health in our churches and faith communities. But to continue doing that, we do need your help. We'd be grateful if you'd consider supporting us, whether through prayer, sharing our resources in your circles, liking or sharing this video, or contributing to our ministry costs. We are a part of Our Daily Bread Ministries, and that means we're funded by the generosity of people like you. To join us in our mission to open up the conversation around faith and mental health, you can check out our blog or other resources, sign up to our mailing list, or connect with us at socials. You can do all of that through heading to our website at anxiousfaith.org or in the links description below. And make sure you subscribe if you want to see more from Anxious Faith, and would love if you share this video with those in your circles. We'll see you next episode.